Winter arrived at Raven's Hollow not with drama, but with discipline, as though the land itself had been trained to endure silence. Snow lay upon the ducal estate in obedient stillness, muting carriage wheels, sealing gates, and cloaking stone in white resignation. It was in this season of restraint that Catherine Ashcombe first understood how completely a woman might disappear without ever leaving a room. She was 22, composed in manner, plainly elegant rather than striking, and possessed of that dangerous quality society rarely forgave in women without fortune: quiet intelligence. Her father, long deceased, had once been steward to the Raven's Hollow lands, a man whose diligence had prevented financial catastrophe during the old duke's decline. His loyalty had been praised, then forgotten, as such virtues often were. Catherine inherited neither wealth nor protection from his service, only a reputation for gratitude that now worked against her. At winter assemblies, she was received with politeness sharpened into distance. Conversations softened when she approached, smiles arranged themselves too carefully. She was invited, yet never sought, acknowledged, yet never claimed. It was whispered that she lingered too long in the Duke's presence, that she misunderstood kindness for promise. The truth, as always, was less convenient than the rumor. Duke Alexander of Raven's Hollow had inherited his title scarcely a year earlier, following his father's sudden death and a legacy burdened by law. At 24, he was admired openly, envied privately, and studied relentlessly by families with marriageable daughters. He bore his position with visible effort, conscious that every gesture, every preference, was measured against the ancient entail governing his estate. Should he fail to secure a bride of approved rank before the close of the season, Raven's Hollow would pass beyond his control, along with generations of inheritance. Alexander noticed Catherine long before he permitted himself to understand why. She did not perform for attention, nor compete for approval. She listened more than she spoke, and when she did speak, she offered thought rather than ornament. In her presence, he found relief from performance, and therein lay the danger. Affection, unguarded, became a liability the moment it was observed. Observation, in that winter, was constant. Servants lingered, acquaintances counted glances, and even the snow seemed to conspire in reflection. Catherine felt it most acutely during a December ball, when a titled matron, mistaking her for invisible, remarked that gratitude was a poor foundation for ambition. The words landed softly, yet with precision, and Catherine did not betray herself by responding. She simply understood. That night, she stood alone at the edge of the ballroom, watching Alexander fulfill his obligations with practiced charm. He bowed, he smiled, he danced, and each movement appeared effortless. Yet she recognized the tension in his shoulders, the restraint in his laughter. She knew him well enough to know he was already being sacrificed to expectation. Catherine returned home through falling snow and packed only what was necessary. Letters remained unanswered, dresses untouched. She did not accuse nor despair. She made a decision shaped by dignity rather than fear. England, she concluded, had no room for women whose value required explanation. When Alexander learned of her intended departure, it was not through confession, but through rumor, delivered with satisfaction. He did not pursue her that night. He did not stop her preparations. He stood instead at the window of the long gallery, watching the grounds disappear beneath fresh snow, aware for the first time that loss did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrived quietly, resolved and irreversible. By the following morning, the household hummed with a restrained unease that no servant named aloud. Invitations were revised, visits postponed, and Alexander's mother, the Dowager Duchess, surveyed her son with measured concern. She spoke of duty as though it were weather, unavoidable and impersonal, reminding him that affection, however sincere, had ruined better men. Her tone was not cruel, merely certain, which made it more difficult to resist. Alexander listened, answered respectfully, and felt the narrowing of his future with each polite exchange. Catherine, meanwhile, walked the familiar paths of the estate one final time, committing their contours to memory. She did not blame Alexander, nor resent the law that bound him. Yet she refused to become a footnote in a story written for another woman. When she paused beneath the bare branches near the frozen river, she allowed herself one unguarded breath of sorrow, then released it into the cold. Her departure would be quiet, but its absence would speak. And though neither could yet name it, winter had set into motion a reckoning neither rank nor silence could prevent. Thus ended the season's beginning, with love unspoken, honor misjudged, and a future already trembling beneath the weight of what had been withheld from both hearts. Alexander did not forbid Catherine's leaving, but neither did he accept it, and the tension between those truths shaped every hour that followed. He sought her company under the pretense of courtesy, speaking to her as one might to a guest already halfway gone, with gentleness edged by urgency. Their conversations were brief, supervised by circumstance, yet weighted with meaning neither dared articulate aloud. He offered small kindnesses that carried disproportionate significance. A volume of poetry appeared upon her chair at breakfast, its margins bearing faint pencil marks from his own hand. Later, he pressed in her palm a pair of gloves lined with fur, explaining with deliberate calm that winter showed no mercy to travelers. Each gift was given without declaration, and each was received with gratitude tempered by restraint. Catherine understood the language of such gestures, and precisely because she understood it, she refused to accept them as promises. The book she returned to his study, placed carefully upon his desk. The glove she left folded beside the door of the gallery. Her refusals were silent, yet unmistakable, and Alexander felt their weight more keenly than reproach. Outside the intimacy of these exchanges, the world pressed inward. Invitations arrived thick with implication, naming eligible women and advantageous alliances. Alexander's name was spoken alongside estates, incomes, and expectations, never alongside affection. His presence at dinners was scrutinized, his absences noted. He moved through these obligations with courtesy, yet found himself increasingly impatient with their predictability. Whispers grew bolder as snow continued to fall. It was said Catherine lingered because she hoped to be rescued. It was said Alexander indulged her out of guilt, not inclination. When he escorted her across the courtyard one afternoon, cloaks drawn close against the cold, a maid's startled glance confirmed what he already suspected. Privacy no longer existed. That evening, a letter arrived from a distant cousin, reminding him pointedly of the entail's conditions and the limited patience of Parliament. Catherine heard the rumors as one hears distant bells, aware of their presence without chasing their source. Yet one evening, as she prepared to withdraw from a gathering early, a young lady approached her with a smile sharpened by curiosity. She spoke of the Duke's generosity, of how fortunate Catherine was to inspire such attention, and suggested that gratitude, when prolonged, often became expectation. Catherine listened without interruption, then thanked her for the advice. The exchange cost her nothing outwardly, but it sealed her resolve. That night, Catherine wrote to an acquaintance abroad, inquiring discreetly about passage. She sealed the letter without ceremony, aware that each step toward departure must be made before courage faltered. When she extinguished the candle, she did so with deliberate calm, refusing sentimentality its indulgence. Alexander, meanwhile, found himself awake long after the household slept, seated before a dying fire, turning over the implications of restraint. He had been taught that honor lay in obedience to law, yet no tutor had prepared him for the particular cruelty of laws that asked one to abandon happiness quietly. He rose before dawn and walked the grounds alone, the snow unmarked except by his own steps, and wondered when he had begun to feel like a guest within his own life. Their paths crossed unexpectedly the following afternoon near the stables, where the air smelled of frost and leather. Catherine, wrapped against the cold, paused as Alexander approached, uncertainty flickering across her composure. He spoke of the weather, of travel conditions, of concern, all of it layered beneath what he did not yet allow himself to confess. She responded with equal care, thanking him for his consideration and assuring him of her readiness. In that moment, the distance between them felt both deliberate and unbearable. Alexander reached instead for formality, escorting her back toward the house with measured pace. As they parted, Catherine hesitated, then said quietly that some truths, once revealed, altered everything, and that silence could be a form of mercy. Before he could question her meaning, she was gone, leaving him standing beneath a sky heavy with snow, aware that something irrevocable had begun to stir beneath the surface of restraint. He remained there long after the cold crept through his coat, conscious that her warning was neither threat nor plea, but invitation. Catherine had placed the burden of choice where it belonged, and in doing so unsettled the careful order of his world. The entail, the expectations, the whispered counsel of society suddenly felt less immutable than before. As dusk fell, Ravensshallow's windows glowed against the snow, and Alexander turned back toward the house, carrying with him the first dangerous certainty that love, once named by silence, demanded courage equal to law, and that winter had not yet revealed its cruelest trial, for them both, without mercy ahead. Snow had begun to fall again by nightfall, finer than before, as if the sky itself had grown cautious. The long gallery at Raven's Hollow lay illuminated by moonlight, each tall window reflecting winter's pale resolve upon the marble floor. Catherine moved through the corridor with measured steps, her cloak folded over her arm, her departure fixed for the morning. She did not expect interruption, yet she sensed it before she heard him. Alexander stood at the far end of the gallery, no longer guarded by company or title, only by uncertainty. He had dismissed propriety with the day and now approached her without ceremony. When he spoke her name, it carried none of the ease she had known before. She turned, and in that instant both understood that silence had reached its limit. He asked her to stay, not as a duke issuing request, but as a man stripped of pretense. Catherine answered with honesty equally unadorned. She told him she would not be the cause of his dispossession, nor endure a lifetime measured by whispered charity. Her voice did not tremble, but the space between words did. Alexander confessed, then what restraint had cost him. He spoke of inheritance as burden, of expectation as confinement, of affection as the single truth he had not learned to disown. He admitted fear, not of scandal, but of choosing wrongly and living correctly forever. As his words fell into the quiet, Catherine saw not indecision, but exhaustion. She listened, allowing him the dignity of being heard, then revealed the truth she had guarded since girlhood. Her mother, long dismissed as obscure, had been privately acknowledged by a viscount whose name still carried weight. Proof existed, legal and undeniable, preserved by caution rather than ambition. Catherine had never intended to claim it. To do so without love would be transaction, and she would not be bartered into belonging. Alexander absorbed the revelation without immediate response. He understood at once the magnitude of her restraint. This knowledge could free him from the entail's threat, yet she offered it only under condition that stripped him of excuse. She would not save him from duty unless he chose her in full awareness of sacrifice. For a moment, the gallery held nothing but breath and falling snow. Alexander crossed the distance between them slowly, as though each step recalibrated his life. He told her he would not ask her to prove herself to a society unworthy of her courage. He would choose her without evidence, without leverage, without escape. Catherine met his gaze, searching for obligation, and found none. She saw resolve, imperfect yet unwavering. When he reached for her hand, it was not possession but promise, and she allowed herself to accept it. They stood thus, unobserved, while winter pressed against the windows. Yet choice did not erase consequence. Alexander acknowledged that morning would bring confrontation, family resistance, and public scrutiny. Catherine agreed to face it, not as beneficiary, but as equal. They parted then, not with despair, but with clarity that sharpened anticipation. As Catherine returned to her chamber, she did not pack further. Alexander remained in the gallery until dawn threatened the horizon, aware that whatever followed would demand everything he had been taught to preserve. Outside, the snow continued its patient descent, bearing witness to a decision that would soon test whether love could withstand daylight, law, and the unyielding memory of winter. He did not sleep. Bells marked the hours with indifferent precision, each toll reminding him that dawn would summon the world he had defied. In those hours he considered his mother's warnings, the estate ledgers, the tenants whose lives intertwined with his own. He acknowledged the risk without retreating from it. Love, he realized, was not rebellion for its own sake, but responsibility willingly embraced. Catherine, too, lay wakeful, her thoughts disciplined yet restless. She recalled her father's quiet integrity, the lessons of self-command he had impressed upon her, and she resolved to meet scrutiny without bitterness. If she must be judged, she would be judged standing. When first light brushed the frost along the windows, she rose composed, certain that whatever name society granted her by evening, she would not surrender her self-respect. The house stirred, the snow softened, and the day approached with measured inevitability, poised to demand that private truth submit itself to public reckoning. Neither yet knew how cruel daylight could be, nor how fiercely compassion might answer it. They knew only that the night had altered them, and that return was impossible. Somewhere beyond the gates, England waited with its rules prepared, unaware that a reckoning had already been agreed upon in quiet resolve. Winter still lingered, counting the cost. It would soon demand their answer, and neither intended to flee. Not now, not ever. Morning broke over Raven's Hollow without ceremony. The snow softened into a pale crust that reflected a cautious sun. Catherine descended the stairs with composed resolve, her bearing unchanged, though every step carried the weight of what had been decided. The household sensed alteration, as if the air itself had shifted, and servants moved with careful restraint. Alexander awaited her in the small withdrawing room, having already dismissed the obligations arranged for him that day. He spoke first to his mother, not with defiance, but with clarity that brooked no redirection. He told her he would marry Catherine Ashcombe, and that no alternative would be entertained. The Dowager Duchess listened, her expression reserved, as though studying a fracture in familiar stone. She warned him of consequence, of scandal, of permanent loss, and he acknowledged each without retreat. When she asked whether affection was worth inheritance, he replied that inheritance without affection was a different kind of loss. The answer ended the discussion. Word traveled quickly, shaped by disbelief and sharpened by curiosity. Catherine was summoned to rooms where she had once been received as a tolerated guest, now examined as a disruption. She answered questions with calm precision, neither apologizing nor pleading. When a matter of lineage arose, she did not yet reveal her proof, refusing to wield it as defense. Her silence unsettled them more than argument. Alexander insisted upon public declaration before convenience could intervene. In a small gathering arranged with deliberate speed, he announced his intention and accepted the scrutiny that followed. Some faces reflected shock, others relief, as though certainty, however inconvenient, was preferable to suspense. Catherine stood beside him, neither elevated nor diminished, and met the gaze of the room without faltering. Resistance came swiftly, though without unity. Letters arrived questioning judgment. Alliances withdrew, and invitations were rescinded. Yet alongside opposition emerged unexpected support, quiet and sincere. Those who remembered her father's service spoke with renewed respect, and a few, emboldened by Alexander's resolve, voiced admiration rather than reproach. The balance of opinion shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. When Catherine at last presented her evidence, it was done without spectacle, submitted formally, and received with reluctant acknowledgement. The truth, once revealed, altered the tone of conversation, though not its intensity. She did not celebrate the validation, nor did she seek apology. Her purpose had never been elevation, only equity. Winter began its retreat, As proceedings concluded, snow receded from the grounds, and the river loosened its hold on ice. The change felt earned rather than granted. Alexander and Catherine faced the remainder of the season with composure, attending what they must and declining what they could. They were no longer observed as curiosity, but regarded with measured respect. Their marriage was set for early spring, modest by design, absent the excess that might provoke commentary. On the morning of the ceremony, Catherine dressed without assistance, choosing simplicity over ornament. Alexander waited beneath the bare branches near the chapel, the estate stretching behind him like a witness reconciled to change. When she joined him, there was no hesitation, only recognition. The vows were spoken plainly, witnessed by those who mattered, and received without interruption. No triumph marked the moment, only relief and steady joy. The union did not erase opposition entirely, but it rendered it irrelevant. By choosing each other openly, they had denied society its leverage. As the days lengthened, Raven's Hollow adjusted to its new order. Catherine assumed her role with quiet competence, honoring tradition without surrendering herself to it. Alexander governed with renewed purpose, aware that authority gained through courage demanded continued humility. Their partnership became example rather than exception. England did not remember them for scandal, but for endurance. Their story traveled beyond the estate not as caution, but as proof that restraint need not extinguish feeling, and that dignity, once claimed, reshaped the boundaries of acceptance. Winter receded fully, leaving the land altered, though recognizable. In later years, when asked how it began, Catherine would speak of snow and silence, of decisions made without guarantee. Alexander would answer only that love, once chosen, required less explanation than fear. And Raven's Hollow, having witnessed both, stood quietly in testimony, content in the knowledge that some legacies were preserved not by law, but by the courage to defy it together and remain.